Well, going into a new season for some teams or maybe some position groups, it's reload, it's rebuild. But in 2023, one LSU position group, it's not reload, it's not rebuild, it's let's run it back. I'll explain and so much more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, we're on YouTube as well. So listen on your preferred podcast platform. Also, check us out on YouTube, Locked on LSU. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every day. And of course, Locked on LSU, we are part of the Locked on Network, your team every day. Well, it's a little bit of news today. John Emery has decided to come back to LSU for his fifth and final year. So yesterday, was the final day to enter the NFL draft. So after Monday, NFL draft portal is closed, and John Emery did not put his name into the NFL draft. So he will be returning for his fifth and final year at LSU. And he played 11 games this season. And remember, John Emery kind of had a rocky start to the season. Remember, in 2021, he was out for academic ineligibility. And then he did everything that he needed to do in 2021. He got his GPA up to a 3.8, yet he still had to fulfill that 15-game suspension. So he was out for the first 2 games of the season, which I think is so dumb. You suspend him for the year. He gets his grades up. He gets his GPA up. He meets it exceeds the academic requirements, and you're still gonna punish him even a year after. That's beside the point. It's dumb, but that's beside the point, because John Emery is coming back to LSU next season. So what does that mean? Well, look at John Emery just himself. Like I said, he played in 11 games this season. In those 11 games, he had 76 rushes, 375 yards. And I think a really underestimated or underappreciated part of John Emery's game is his contribution in the pass game. He had 13 receptions for 129 yards, and also he had 2 receiving touchdowns. That's big when you're talking about scheme, and especially, when with LSU in their running back room, and even, next year included. You have Noah Cain coming back next season rather, Armani Goodwin coming back next season, Josh Williams coming back next season. So this running back room is huge. So you add John Emery into the mix, that's huge as a whole. But looking at John Emery's addition in the passing game is invaluable when you're talking about scheme. Because I mentioned that you're going to have plenty of guys come back in that running back room. That was one great thing that LSU had this year, was they had the ability to be kind of like a running back by committee. That they had the ability to put in, John Emery on third down, because he's more of your pass catching back. But then you also can experiment with some other, just big bodied, just nose to the grindstone runners. So that's one good thing, is John Emery coming back allows you to be a little bit more creative in your scheme, a little bit more creative in your system, because he is that kind of running back that can catch passes out of the backfield and can add you, some contributions in the passing game. I think that's one really big thing. The second thing is, like I just mentioned, this team is going to be returning its entire running back room, essentially. Noah Cain, Josh Williams, Armani Goodwin, and don't forget that in the 2023 class, they're bringing in Trey Holly. Trey Holly is a local kid. Caleb Jackson is coming in the 2023 class. So this running back room is going to be absolutely stacked. And if you look at LSU's season as their rushers as a whole, LSU was returning 5 of its leading rushers. One of those, obviously, is Jayden Daniels, the leading rusher in 2022 on the team. Josh Williams, Noah Cain, John Emery, Armani Goodwin, all 4 of those running backs will be coming back. So 5 of your leading rushers in the 2022 season will be coming back in 2023. Now, I don't know what Jayden Daniels' role is going to be in the passing game in 2020, or excuse me, in the run game in 2023. That's absolutely one of his strengths. I don't see Jayden Daniels coming back in 2023 and rushing for almost 900 yards. I don't necessarily see that, and I think that's probably a good thing for this LSU offense. But having Jayden Daniels' versatility and ability in the run game and his elusiveness in the run game is huge. But John Emery coming back and being another addition into that running back room, I think is key, is paramount. To kind of, rain on everybody's parade, what I need to see from John Emery in his fifth year in 2023, dude's got to stop turning the ball over. He has got to stop turning the ball over. John Emery had 4 fumbles on the season. Fumbled against Auburn, fumbled against Tennessee, and the fumble against Tennessee wasn't the difference of the game. That was a 40-13 loss. But whenever I see little blunders like that, whether that's a penalty, a dumb penalty that you take, whether that's a turnover, and it wasn't the difference of the game whether LSU was getting blown out or LSU was blowing out an opponent, it's still something that you have to work on, even though it didn't necessarily affect the impact or the outcome of that individual game. It very well could later on in the season, and a time where, let's just say if John Emery fumbles against Alabama, I don't know if LSU wins that game, because if you turn the ball over against a team like Alabama or a team like Georgia or even a team like Tennessee, those teams are going to be able to capitalize off of that. John Emery had 2 fumbles against UAB, and no, that wasn't the difference in a win or a loss against UAB, but you turn the ball over twice. That's a little bit too much of a trend for me. So I think looking at the pros and cons of John Emery's game, is that he can bring you a lot on the ground and in the air. And we saw just his speed and just how much he can bully defenders. We saw that all season long, but I think it was especially on display against Purdue in the Citrus Bowl. Just how just physical of a back he is. And then you add his pass catching ability and the passing game. I think those are all invaluable traits of John Emery's game. The turnovers need to be limited, because that's where, when you start to get to a point where a guy has the ball in his hands and you're like sitting on the edge of your seat and biting your fingernails, so nervous that they're going to turn the ball over, that's got to change. But I think overall, the continuity in this running back room and the continuity for the run game, I think, is going to be a huge attribute for this LSU offense moving forward, because I think it is such a key component of this LSU offense. I said it so many times throughout the season. This LSU offense performs its best and executes this system best when the run game is balanced with the pass game. And the run game was not LSU's weakness this year at all. It was the passing game that really needed to be worked on a ton. So to return all of those guys, it is so huge. And getting John Emery back, I think, is an absolute key cog to this offense taking the next step forward in 2023. Now, John Emery has foregone the NFL draft. There are some LSU players that have not made that decision and have entered the NFL draft. So what does their futures look like? It's January, it's early, but the mock drafts are coming up. So what are the NFL draft gurus saying about some NFL LSU hopefuls? We'll get into all of that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about betonline.net, because it is the number one source for sports betting information, for stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every single professional and amateur league out there. There's pro football, college bowl season. College bowl season's over, but it's still exciting. Pro basketball, college basketball. You can find it all at betonline.net. So if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at betonline as well. That's my favorite part about betonline, is there are so many resources, whether it's articles or podcasts or looking at some of the trends in Vegas. You can find all of that information at BetOnline. Consider it your one-stop shop. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information, so head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, thanks again for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked on College Basketball. Everything that you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked on College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, John Emery coming back, I think, is the big news. And I want to continue to get into that impact. And I want to get into that throughout the rest of the week. So we will continue that on future shows in the week on Locked On LSU. But I also wanted to touch on some most recent NFL mock drafts and where some of the NFLSU hopefuls are slated to go. So I'll preface all of this by saying last year ahead of the draft, I I took it upon myself to come up with my own little system of grading mock drafters to find which mock draft would be the most accurate. That's how psycho I am. So I looked at some of the top mock drafters and, NFL gurus out there, the Mel Kipers of the world, Dane Brugler. I took Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, and Peter King, who I thought were kind of the top 5 NFL mock drafters, NFL draft insiders. And I evaluated their last 3 mock drafts. And this was going into the 2022 NFL draft. So it was 2019, 2020, and 2021. So I'll probably have to follow up with the 2022 draft to keep everything uploaded. But I created this own point system of grading each NFL mock drafter to see which was the most accurate. It was 3 points for a correct pick all the way around, correct team, correct player, and in the right spot. 2 points if it was the correct position but the wrong player. Maybe this mock drafter had the Bears drafting a wide receiver out of Alabama, but they drafted a wide receiver out of LSU instead. So that would have been 2 points. 2 points if it was the correct team but the wrong pick. So that was kind of a special instance where there's going to be trades where maybe the Giants traded back and they picked that player that mock drafter slated them to take. It was just at a different point. 2 points if it was the correct order of selection but the wrong team. Just like essentially correct but just a few things off. And then 1 point if it was the correct position group. So they drafted they were slated to draft a corner, they drafted a safety instead. Or if it was the wrong player but the exact position. So it was 1 point. So long story short, I made up this entire point system to evaluate the best mock drafters. And my overall hypothesis and overall analysis is that Dane Brugler of The Athletic was the best mock drafter. So whatever that's worth to you, that's why I took to Dane Brugler's NFL mock draft is because per my system, over 2019 to 2021, Dane Brugler had the most accurate final mock draft. So I always take to Dane Brugler. And of course, I look at Mel Kiper. Of course, I look at the Daniel Jeremiahs of the world. But Dane Brugler, per my system, is the most accurate. So he's my favorite. And I wanted to see where the LSU guys who have declared for the NFL draft are slated to go, per Dane Brugler. I took to Dane Brugler's most recent mock draft in The Athletic. And of course, I control F LSU. Find where these guys are going. And of course, I think we can all assume that BJ Ojulari likely will be the first player off the board. And a lot of the, NFL draft gurus, once all of these players right after the season, BJ Ojulari included, had declared for the NFL draft, a lot of these guys have BJ Ojulari slated late first round, early second round. And there are some outliers there. I've seen BJ Ojulari slated as high as top 10 pick in the draft. I wouldn't expect that. I mean, that'd be great for BJ Ojulari and a wonderful testament to this coaching staff and this team just continuing this wonderful storied tradition of the LSU to the NFL pipeline. But Dane Brugler has BJ Ojulari going 35th overall. So early second round, the third pick in the second round of the NFL draft. Has no LSU players going in the first round. Since 2004, so what is that? The last 18 years. There have only been 4 years in the last 18 years where an LSU player was not taken in the first round. In 2010, 2015, 16, and 2018, an LSU player was not in the NFL. It was not taken in the first round of the NFL draft. 15 and 16, the Les Miles year. That was the kind of the downfall of the Les Miles year. And then, of course, 2018 would be Coach O's second year as head coach of the LSU Tigers. So all of that to say, This would only be the fifth year in the last 20-ish years where an LSU player was not taken in the first round of the draft. And really, that's fine. That's okay. There's not a reputation of LSU football or a reputation of LSU players in the NFL that is going to be tainted because one year there's not an LSU player taken in the first round. But I think the important thing here too, if you're one of those people like me that cheers for LSU players in the NFL, and whatever NFL team that you are a fan of, I'm a Saints fan. When an LSU player plays the Saints, I'm a Saints fan. But I'll always cheer for LSU players that are in the NFL. I want good things. I want success for LSU players in the NFL. And I think that's key here because Dane Brugler slates BJ Ojulari to be drafted by the Chicago Bears. And the Chicago Bears are an absolutely atrocious, horrible, horrendous team. But for BJ Ojulari's sake, I think that would be a perfect fit. Now, of course, you can find, other teams that would be great fits, but I think that Chicago would be a great fit for BJ Ojulari because Matt Eberflus is the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Matt Eberflus is a defensive guy through and through. Almost throughout the entirety of his career in the NFL as a coach, he has been a defensive coach, a linebackers coach, moving his way up to defensive coordinator, and now ultimately as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. But looking at Matt Eberflus's career, it seems like every single thing he touches, every linebacker, edge rusher, pass rusher that he touches turns to gold. I look at the beginning of his coaching career, or near the beginning of his coaching career. He was a linebackers coach with the Dallas Cowboys. And you may know the name DeMarcus Ware. DeMarcus Ware was an all-pro with the Dallas Cowboys in 2012. He had double-digit sacks when Matt Eberflus was the linebackers coach with the Dallas Cowboys. Fast forward to his tenure in Indianapolis. He's the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis. Shaq Leonard led the NFL in tackles in 2018 with Matt Eberflus as the defensive coordinator. That's a really small sample size of what just the massive resume that Matt Eberflus has written of unlocking great things from his defensive players, specifically at an edge rusher and a linebacker position. So if BJ Ojulari is taken 35th overall in the beginning of the second round of the NFL draft to the Chicago Bears, I think that's a wonderful fit for BJ Ojulari, for his skill set, for his development to be under a coach like Matt Eberflus. Now, how good of a head coach is Matt Eberflus? It doesn't look so great. I'll be honest with you, but that's a completely different story. I'm not a Chicago Bears fan. I'm not a Chicago Bears insider, but I do know a good coordinator or a good position coach or a good developer. And Matt Eberflus is that for the linebackers and the pass rushers that he has coached in the past. So per Dane Brugler, and things change. Oh my goodness. Over the next 3 months until the NFL draft, things are going to change drastically. But where it stands with Dane Brugler, my guy, my mock drafter, he has BJ Ojulari being the first LSU player off the board at the beginning of the second round. Now, there's a name that wasn't listed, and I think it's just as interesting as the names that were listed. And I'll get into that coming up next. So, breaking down Dane Brugler of The Athletic, and it's a great read if you have a subscription to The Athletic, highly recommend, of his most recent mock draft. And of course, I'm, Control F LSU, looking for the LSU players that are slated to go in the draft and kind of analyzing which players they expect to go at the top. And, whatever team that you're a fan of, you want to look and see whatever your team is going after. But I'm looking around at LSU and I say, okay, BJ Ojulari is slated to go to Chicago at 35. And I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling and I'm not seeing any more highlighted words of where I looked for LSU. Because Dane Brugler slated the first 2 rounds, picks 1 through 63. BJ Ojulari was the only name listed in that mock draft. So what does that mean? When Kayshon Boutte entered the 2022 season, a lot of people slated him to be a top 10 pick, some even a top 5 pick. After this past season, I don't think many mock drafters would have felt the same way. I don't think anyone would argue that the expectations for Kayshon Boutte were not met this season. For the ability that we saw and the contributions that we saw from Kayshon Boutte last year before he got injured, I think we were all expecting an absolute breakout season. I think we were all expecting, and if you weren't, I at least was expecting a top of the of college football kind of season, a kind of season where everybody's talking about it, and that's not what happened. And honestly, it wasn't even close. Everybody was talking about Kayshon Boutte, but it wasn't because of what he was doing. It was because of what he wasn't doing. It's because of the impact that he wasn't making, that we all were expecting. And we can speculate of why that was all we want. And I don't really want to do that right now. We have all off season to do that. But I think the key point here is everyone expected Kayshon Boutte to be a top 10 pick going into this season. And now, at least per Dane Brugler, and there'll be other mock drafters that think different things. There may be some mock drafters that think Kayshon Boutte could be a first round talent, which I do think he has the ability to. I just don't think that he's shown NFL general managers enough to go in the first round. If I'm an NFL GM, based off of what I've seen from Kayshon Boutte on the field, honestly, I don't know if I want to, put my first round asset into a player that wasn't able to have a breakout season like we all expected him to. It's not a knock on Kayshon Boutte. It's simply just the reality. But I think another part of that too is NFL general managers and scouts place a whole lot of real estate and a whole lot of importance in attitude, in off the field decorum, in how they expect you to conduct yourself within an NFL locker room. That's almost just as important, if not just as important, as what you can do on the field. Like I mentioned every show, I do sports talk in Nashville. I cover the Titans very closely. I cover the Titans every single day. The Titans in 2020 drafted a left tackle out of Georgia by the name of Isaiah Wilson. And you may not know the name Isaiah Wilson because Isaiah Wilson is no longer in the NFL. Isaiah Wilson played, I think, 2, maybe 3 snaps for the Tennessee Titans because as soon as he got drafted, he was a problem. It was, getting busted by the police for jumping off a roof at a party. It was, breaking NFL rules. It was DUIs. It was just constant trouble that Isaiah Wilson was getting into. And I'm not saying Kayshon Boutte's that guy. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is off the field decorum and your behavior is so important because the Titans spent a first round pick on who they thought was going to be their tackle of the future. And now they're stuck with a horrendous offensive line and, no contribution from their first round pick in 2020. And I don't want to bore you with Tennessee Titans trivia all night long, but that's just, a point that I'm getting to is off the field attitude is really important for NFL GMs. I'm not saying that Kayshon Boutte has a bad attitude in the locker room. I don't think that he does because everything that we have heard from Brian Kelly and this coaching staff is he's been a great leader. He's really stepped up. But the way that Kayshon Boutte exited and the LSU program, I think may leave a little bit of a bad taste in some NFL general managers' mouths because you can't always predict how a player is going to shake out. Some players absolutely just boom in college. Sometimes they're the best players in college football, and they just don't work out in the league. It happens all the time. So it's not always easy to predict what can happen on the field. But conducting those kind of interviews and evaluating their behavior in college but off the field, what kind of a leader were they? How did they interact with the coaching staff? All of those things matter. And I do think that Kayshon Boutte's, he declared that he was coming back to LSU. He took to the social medias that he was coming back. And then, a few weeks later, it was, no, he's not going to be available for the bowl game. And then a few hours later, it was, oh, I'm going to the NFL draft. And all of the rumors surrounding Kayshon Boutte, which may or may not be true. I'm not here to start rumors. I'm not here to perpetuate gossip, but it's out there. I think that's what's pushing Kayshon Boutte even further away from some of the top rounds of the draft. After the season, I didn't see Kayshon Boutte as going in the first round, but I said maybe he could be a second or third rounder. He could be a day 2 guy. And that's still really, that's prime draft picks. That's prime draft stock. There are plenty of second, third, fourth round picks that have very successful careers in the NFL. You know who got drafted in the fourth round? Dak Prescott. And he's a starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. So I think that after this season, that pushed his draft stock down. Absolutely. I really ultimately thought that's why he was deciding to come back to LSU in 2023 in the first place, was to improve his draft stock, to be able to solidify himself as being just as good as the LSU, the bright spots in the NFL, the Jarvis Landrys, the Odell Beckham Juniors, the Jamar Chases, the Justin Jefferson, so on and so forth. He wanted to be like those guys. And how everything has been handled over the past couple of weeks, I think only pushes him back even more. So if you look at these mock drafts, which in reality may mean nothing, truly. I mean, there could be things that are being cooked up behind the scenes in these NFL front offices, and we have no idea. But if you see these mock drafts and you start to, scroll and scroll and scroll and say, this is ridiculous. Kayshon Boutte could have been one of the best wide receivers in college football this year. And you wonder why he's not there. I think that's why. So, looking at all these mock drafts as they start to come out, you're going to see BJ Ojulari, I think, as a consensus late first rounder, early second rounder. But I think that Kayshon Boutte's draft stock was hurt throughout the season, and he hurt himself more than anything with the way that things have gone down. And, it's a shame. It is what it is. I hope that he has a very long and successful career in the NFL. Truly. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. Coming up on tomorrow's episode of Locked on LSU, some drama that went down at one of LSU's yearly opponents, what happened with one of their recruits, and how LSU can learn from their mistakes. We'll get into all of that on tomorrow's episode, but thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen today. For your second listen, check out your brand new podcast, Locked on College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything that you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big name experts, coaches, players, and throughout the basketball landscape. Locked on College Basketball available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.